Hi, I'm Jon Atack,
I'm Sam Atack.
and we're going to talk about humour. And you may have noticed if you've watched some of these videos that
We have none.
we're completely sober and serious at all times, and we recommend that. One of the things, I guess my central subject is authoritarianism. What I'm opposed to is authoritarianism, and there are two forms of that. One is authoritarian leaders, and the other is authoritarian followers, people who believe that it's best to be bullied and told what to do by somebody who is smarter than they are. Well, I don't. I believe in consensus. I believe in democracy, which may, as Churchill observed, be a poor system, but it's better than any of the other systems human beings have come up with. And one of the things that I noticed was that authoritarian groups, and people like to call them cult groups, we'll talk about new religious movements, which is what some sociologists like to call them. But our concern is for the authoritarian groups. It's not how new or how religious or how moving they are.
Yeah, how authoritarian they are.
It's how authoritarian they are. And I noticed that people lose their sense of humour in these groups. They get very touchy about what you might say. And the humour within the groups is very caustic. It's an attack upon enemies of the group.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't mean any harm by this, but when I was 17 or 18, a friend took me to a Christadelphian meeting, and I've never heard of them before, and I've never heard of them since. They say, they shouldn't have the symbol of the cross, and you can understand that. I mean, I think that Bill Hicks, pointed out that Jesus probably hasn't come back because people keep waving crosses around. Do it to me again. So he makes the still thinking of JFK, Jackie. But that was Bill Hicks, and that's he's quite humorous in places, quite caustic in other places. The comedy of hate, as he called it. So the Christadelphian meeting, the one of the people stood up and said something about Darwin and monkeys, and they all erupted into laughter. And it was just surprising to me that this was something that was dismissed as a ridiculous idea, and ridicule is the form of humour that you will find in such groups. Now, I have been guilty of a little bit of ridicule myself from time to time, and I grew up in a loving and wonderful family, which I've since learned is not true for everyone, where there was a great deal of humour, and some of it was sarcastic, some of it was kind of
critical,
bitter-ish. There was a degree of irony, which I found that many of my American friends have a little difficulty when you say the opposite of what you mean.
Yeah.
And they sort of, what? Because it's not a part of American culture in the same way that it is in British culture. And we also have a lot of self-deprecating humour. So you're meant to joke about yourself and what have you. But humour is uniquely human. As far as we know, dolphins do smile, but we're not sure what they're smiling at. Chimpanzees seem to have something that's like laughter.
Oh.
But and they grin, but they usually grin in fear. So it doesn't mean the same. So we appear, as far as we know, unless the humpback whales are telling jokes to each other in those great 36-hour-long songs. We appear to be the only species that developed humour, and humour and intelligence, I think, must go hand in hand.
Depends which comedian, really.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not to say that comedians are necessarily intelligent or that humour is necessarily intelligent, but I think that to understand, to get through life, sometimes you have to see the funny side. And there are times when there isn't one.
Yes.
But it's interesting. I've been doing a lot of reading about China recently. I'm very, very concerned about the current fascist administration of China. Now, I know that's now guaranteed that I'll never get a visa to go to this place. I would love to visit. I'm sorry about that. But this is, nothing to do with communism, and it never has been. China is a tyranny. It's a dictatorship. Whether it's Mao or Deng or President Xi, it's a dictatorship which has enforced compliance. I'm very interested in those compliance methods because I'm interested in authoritarianism and how it's developed in the world, and the influence that those methods have had on certain Western groups, particularly, the Moonies are not a Western group. They came out of South Korea, the Unification Church, not of Samananati, or Moonies. Actually, Sun Myung Moon spent 3 years in a North Korean camp, and he then was part of, I think he led Victory Over Communism, where they basically used the so-called brainwashing Tsinao techniques to make people not believe in communism. And he then formed a religion with the help of members of the Korean Central Intelligence Agency. Bo Hai Pak was a colonel in the KCIA and was his immediate deputy. Probably just a coincidence. And the fact that they all run lots of gun factories and stuff, it's a religion. Don't worry about it. But the Chinese, part of the program, the educational program in the Chinese universities from 1953 onwards, and I have checked my dates, one of the things that was taught that you mustn't have a sense of humour. You mustn't joke about things. It's all very serious, and that's difficult for the Chinese because the Chinese are actually a really the many nations of China, more than 50 nations, but nonetheless, they are people with a tremendous humour. They've written many amusing novels and stories over the centuries. It's a part of their culture. But then communism came along. I'm told that in this is. Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah, okay.
So this is the Soviet Union before Russia.
Soviet Union.
Yeah, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, which was governed by Russia. But they basically, lots of countries have broken away from. You had the Union, then you had the Warsaw Pact countries, which were invaded by Stalin after the Second War, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland. But they were not part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which was disbanded finally by Gorbachev in, I think, 1991, and included, Azerbaijan, for example, was part of it. There are various, Tajikistan, various countries that have now, are independent, Georgia, the Ukraine. But they were all part of that union. Yeah. So it wasn't Russia. It was a group of countries who'd been squeezed into compliance. So anyway, that's an introduction to...
No, you tell it.
Well, it's just to say that they arrested... we've read they arrested comedians. Yeah. And telling jokes was forbidden. And so the comedians, being comedians, actually started numbering jokes. And so they could sit in the cell and one of them would say 19 and another one would say 8, and they'd all look at him and go,
that's not appropriate.
That's not appropriate at this moment.
That's quite sexist, really.
How could you?
I wanted to tell also the North Korea one, that after the leader died, was this Kim Il-sung?
Kim Jong-un.
Not the current one.
It's the granddad.
Yeah, the granddad. When Kim
Jong-un.
Oh, okay.
Kim Il-sung.
Kim Il-sung.
Kim Jong-il. Or something like that.
It's wrong.
But
after he died, there was an order that nobody could laugh for 3 years and couldn't drink for 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, the laughter, maybe, but I don't normally drink, actually, so that's a joke. Well, apart from, cordial. Can't live without Apple and Plum Cordial by Bottle Green. We definitely recommend this as a drink. Very good for you.
Not sponsored.
Less sugar than fruit juice. So it's not as bad for your teeth. In Scientology, a subject I try to avoid as much as possible, there was a policy letter introduced called Joking and Degrading, and you weren't allowed to say anything, amusing about Ron Hubbard. You could say things about psychiatrists, communists and bankers, and journalists and homosexuals, of course, though I never really went along with that. That always seemed to me that Hubbard's homophobia was despicable, and his sexism and his racism. But that may just be me, maybe he was Maitreya.
Yeah.
But probably not. He claimed to be the Buddha who would lead everybody to enlightenment, and then he died, which proves that wasn't in fact true. But I can remember my friend Mitch and I, we were on a coach down to an event that we'd been summoned to, and it's the only one I can remember actually going to in 9 years. It was in London, it was a big thing, and it was where their Jane Kember, who was the head of their Guardian's office, which is now called the Office of Special Affairs, was saying that they weren't guilty of these crimes they were accused of in the US. This was shortly before her boss, Mary Sue Hubbard, wrote I think it's 217 pages, a stipulation of evidence, a confession, which admitted to kidnapping, false imprisonment, theft, breaking and entering, forging government credentials, and quite a lot of things. But Jane Kember and her staff were there to tell us all that all they'd done was, if they had stolen anything, it was just paper, because they'd made photocopies of government documents, and so they'd pay for the paper, and that would all be fine. She was later sentenced to a year in jail.
Yes.
Quite rightly. But we were summoned to this event, and we were on the coach, and Mitch was, in his usual ribaldry, that's a good word, was talking about L. Ron Sideboard, as he often did. And the ethics officer from the Birmingham organisation, who was one of those kind of policemen, are all 12 years old these days, he's got a little bum fluff moustache and what have you. And he came to tell us that hadn't we read this Joking and Degrading, then we'd be in really big trouble. And it changed nothing, I'm afraid. We were jokers and degraders throughout, and carried on for the next couple of years until we actually left. So there is this authoritarian quality of suppressing humour. Now, nasty humour, ridicule, put-downs, that's a different matter. We just talked about J.P. Sears, who can be a little harsh. But in talking about him, we also talked about Bob Newhart. And if you want a guide for the best in humour, then go and watch Bob Newhart on Walter Raleigh. Or what was that, Walt? You've got a boat full of leaves. He's got a boat full of leaves, everyone. Yet they fall off the trees every year, Walt. The invention of the first tobacco to reach our shores. What a great man Walter Raleigh was. He liked flaying Spaniards alive. That was how he entertained himself. It's great when you look at the heroes of history, and you get a bit of a view of, oh dear, and you really do need a sense of humour to get past that. But Bob Newhart, go and watch Bob Newhart. And if you don't find it funny, then you need counselling. and
snap out of it.
And snap out of it. Stop it. I'm Jon Atack.
I'm Sam Atack.
And we've had a laugh against wobbly. Aha. Stevie Wonder. Superstitious. Yeah. Cool blimey, Mrs. Jones. How's your Bert's lumbago? Mustn't grumble. Wishing and hoping and praying and dreaming. Oh, somebody. I now will fill my lungs. Here we all are sitting in rave up.